Hello, everyone. I am here to talk about the board observations PowerPoint in which I did on Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation. The board meeting information is as follows. It was on February 16th, 2020 at 10 a.m. and the location that was at the main campus of the Kaufman Foundation, downtown Kansas City. Participants were 10 members of the board, which were all section leaders, and of course, the 10th actual member was the president of the board, in which was conducting the meeting. When it comes to the strategies for more productive nonprofit board meetings article that we read, there was a few things that transpired that I would like to discuss. It started with the mission statement. Now, they didn't read the mission statement, they just more or less said mission as still as followed, which I understood what they meant, but the slide does say mission statement and have the mission statement. Yes, there was an agenda. The agenda was actually created by the president of the board, in which was speaking and addressing certain situations in which he had identified throughout the time period in which they did not do a meeting, which basically it breaks down to every quarter. There was a pre-meeting packet sent out to each individual. I had to get this information from a member, in which got me into the meeting, that basically was sent out a week prior so that people had time to get with their sections to discuss certain topics that the president of the board was going to ask questions. When it comes to the start and ending of the meeting, if it was on time or late, this is something I don't think was aligned. There was a start time, it did start on time, but they didn't actually establish if this was going to be a 45-minute meeting or a 1 hour meeting. So therefore, the end time was basically going off of the president, in which was basically running the meeting. There really wasn't a lot of time for a member or two members to dominate the meeting. The meeting wasn't long enough due to probably the fact that I was in the meeting as a attendee or a participant, and really there wasn't a lot of business going to be conducted due to that fact. They asked for action. Of course, that means basically, hey, how are we doing? They talked about some fundraising things that are going to go on, resources needed, and what dates and shortfalls were occurring. And then, of course, it was summarized at the end by the president of the board, and then closed out by anybody who had any open type information to discuss when it came to the meeting and the topics at hand, or open floor for stuff that possible agendas for the next meeting. When it comes to Robert's Rule of Order, during the meeting, the agenda structure is similar to Robert's Rule of Order, but you could see that it's more of a relaxed situation during their meeting. No voting happened during the meeting while I was present. However, I do assume that old business would have been discussed from the last meeting if something pertinent wasn't included into that old business. I think a lot of stuff wasn't discussed due to my actual being in the meeting. The minutes from the last meeting is something that wasn't signed by the president. So I think that's an improve that they need to do in the future, is make sure they sign the meetings as Robert's Rule of Order discuss, so that you can close out that old business and continue forward with the new business in which you have. When it comes to roles that people play, the meeting was a basic meeting based because there wasn't a lot that I think they were going to discuss while they had a visitor in the room, especially when it comes to finances, future projects, and things like that. I think they maintained it casual and informal due to my presence, which is okay. But the president really ran the whole meeting because that was his agenda topics. He did ask questions of each one of the board members based off of their sections, off of things he identified throughout the quarter. which I've seen meetings run like that before, where the president or someone running the meeting runs the show, which is not unusual. And then, of course, we have some other board information that was also talked about on the paper in which I wrote. The president creates the agenda topics, and I think that is standard. He might hand them to a secretary or admin specialist to send out or to organize, but the president talks about the agenda topics and creates them. The board meets 4 times a year, as I discussed earlier. 4 times meaning once a quarter, and therefore that's how come the president is able to create these agenda topics based off of things that's going on. When you talk about quorums, there was a quorum for their meeting because all members were present. But say that less than half of the members are present due to some circumstance, then you don't have a quorum to vote. But there was no voting that happened when the individuals were around when I was present. Packets, of course, are sent out weekly prior to the meeting so that people can get their ducks in order to understand what's going to be talked about and what the boss or president is going to want to discuss. And then, of course, each member answered questions of the president depending on the topic discussed, which is common practice for many organizations, where the president will ask questions and people respond based off their piece of pie within the situation. Other than that, these 6 slides comprise of the information that I had on my paper about the board meeting in which I observed. I hope that everybody has a good night and talk to you soon.